Welcome to Let's Grow, conversations with your local mental health and wellness specialists. I'm Linda Kelly, the Executive Director and founder of the Kelly Mental Health Foundation. Here with me today, we have Lara Hollway. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And today we wanted to talk about specifically an article that you wrote. But first, tell me about yourself, your background.
Yeah, I have a bit of a diverse background coming into social work. So I have a background in guiding, wilderness guiding, and the arts. And then some life events brought me to social work and therapy and counseling.
Wow. So right now, what you do most of the time is the counseling.
Yeah. Well, actually, I work half-time as a potter and then half-time as a counselor.
That's wild. I love that. So on this article that you wrote it was a blog post, and it was called Making Room for Pain.
Yeah.
And what an interesting concept, and even just the title kind of draws us in. So what attracted you to this, the idea in the first place?
For me, it's very personal. It was a journey I went on looking at, especially in my late teens, early 20s, just feeling so much pain in my life, and kind of compounded things had happened, including loss and trauma. I was like, okay, how do I get myself out of this place? And from there, in terms of healing and the healing journey I went through, it started this exploration of why do we have pain in our lives, and then for me it became a difference of what is the role of pain, and then what is the role of suffering, and what's the difference between the two. And
right.
Some kind of heavy topics, but I was pretty fascinated by them.
It's interesting in some ways to be fascinated by it rather than just
Yeah.
reactive to it, right? Where most of us are, we avoid pain, right? We run away.
100%. Yeah. I think actually and I'll be completely honest, I avoided pain as best I could for as long as I could. And then when I was no longer able to, it was kind of journeying from there, going okay, that finding for myself, and then finding that other people had done so much work on this, that pain is this really important normal process. It's a message system letting us know something's happening, what do you want to do about this? And then noticing that for so many of us the first instinct is to be nothing, I don't want to even feel this, I want it to go away. And that, I think, is where suffering comes in. That's where this, all of a sudden we start feeling like we can't feel this pain, or we need it to go away right now, so we shove it away into the closet, kind of.
Right. So that you're saying too that there's a value to pain.
A huge value. Yeah.
And there's a big difference then between pain and suffering?
Yeah, so I think that if you think of pain as a message coming to you, whether it's from internally or from the universe saying, this is a potentially dangerous thing, or even this is just something that needs your attention. So if the coffee in here was really hot and I touched it, I was like, ow. So that's pain. Similarly, if I have an interaction with somebody and my feelings get hurt, that's pain. If I lose a loved one, that's pain. If I exercise and my muscles hurt, that's pain. But even as I went through that list, I'm assuming you categorize those as either good or bad, because that's what we do. We go okay, exercise pain is good, and unless it's a broken bone or a hurt muscle, and then it's bad. And this is an okay pain, but the loss of a loved one is a bad pain. And we know how to have, quote unquote, good pain in our lives. We know how to handle the fact that my hands just got burned. Ow, okay, I can go on with my day. But I don't think as a society or as a community we have a lot of skills around processing pain that we label as bad, or that's bigger or more emotional or spiritual in that kind of sense. And so I, drawing on a lot of work in this area, but especially Tara Brach, her book Radical Acceptance, this idea of suffering comes from when we have this big pain, this big loss, this big world shift, and we don't want to feel it, so we push it away, and I think that's the suffering piece.
Right. So you must see that a lot, then, people kind of pushing away their pain. How do people typically do that? What does it look like?
Oh, I think that's probably the majority of the people who come into to seek out counseling. It's that they've been pushing away pain, and then all of a sudden it's not working as well as it once did. I think there's any kind of ways we can push away pain, whether it's substance use, exercising, avoiding, socializing, hermiting, eating, shopping, anything that kind of gives you that little rush of pleasure, and the opposite end of the spectrum, or even just distracts you, numbs you, I think,
Right.
is the opposite, or way of pushing away pain.
So I could see a lot of people hearing you say that and saying, hey, what's wrong with my Netflix addiction? Why can't I do online shopping? I mean, but that's not really what you're saying, that you can't do these things.
No, it's that how well are they working for you? It's so yeah, if I got a really bad test score and I was like, you know what, this is the last thing I want to think about today, I'm just going to distract myself and watch some TV, or I'm going to go out with my friends and try to have a fun time, or I'm going to have a crack a beer, or something like that. In the grand scheme of life, is that okay? It's like you get to decide whether that's okay for you. I think what I find is often people, the more often you kind of push away those hard feelings and never give them space in your life, the more often they pile up and they start to pile up, and it gets into this bigger and bigger pile. And then all of a sudden something fairly small will happen, or big, but all of a sudden then you fail a test, and for some reason it feels like the world's ended. It feels like you're having a complete and utter breakdown, and you don't know why you're reacting this way to something that you've handled before. And I think it's that kind of moment when people are all of a sudden, they realize, they're like, I was never handling it. I was just never dealing with it.
Wow,
And
so it just piles up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the impact is that much more intense.
Because it's like if you picture a stuffed closet that, for a little bit you can just put your stuff in, you're like, okay, I'll deal with this later, And then like you kind of crack the door open, you can still shove some more things in, but at a certain point it all just comes out, and it's all around you on the floor, and you're like, okay, this is all the pain I've ever felt in my life, and now I have to process through it all at once, or it feels that way anyway.
Right.
So,
But then for people that have been stuffing it away for a really long time, that idea of everything falling out of the closet can be terrifying.
of course, yeah. And that's, I think, the difference of sometimes why people come to counseling instead of starting to go like, hey, I'd like to make some changes in my life. Maybe I'll start processing pain. It's in your kind of everyday life, if you're thinking like, hey, I tend to avoid pain. Maybe I'd like to start looking at it. That's a lot less scary than somebody who's opened the closet door, all the pain's gone all over the floor, and they're like, I need help. And I think that's why people come to therapy, because then it's about going like, okay, we can help you pick this up. We can help you process this in a way that feels grounded and safe in that way.
Right. So it's just kind of having another person there to help pick up the pieces, help sort things out.
Yeah.
And for someone that has opened that closet and have everything tumbled out, it is just completely overwhelming. So that's really amazing that they have that opportunity to then, okay, let's clean this up.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we come back, we're going to talk about tips for coping with pain and how to make room for it. Welcome back to Let's Grow. I'm Linda Kelly, your host, and I'm here with Lara Hollway, talking about making room for pain. Hi. Welcome back. One of the things that you mentioned when we first began this conversation was just about the value of pain and how that's so, it seems like against our instinct to embrace pain.
Yeah.
Right. So can you tell me about just what do you mean when you say that pain is valuable?
Yeah, it is a hard one, I think, especially in our society where we really value productivity, and pain and productivity don't go hand in hand, you know? So if even bringing it into the physical body, if you have a headache, or say you went to the gym and you exercised really hard and your muscles are hurting, even sitting with that pain, and when I say sitting with pain, I mean just acknowledging the reality, you know, like I am in pain right now, my head hurts or my body hurts or I stubbed my toe. That makes it so that I'm not as productive. You know, I have to acknowledge, I'm moving slower, or, you know, to really give this headache its full due, I should sit quietly for a moment or two, or something like that. And instead we take, you know, anti-inflammatories or pain medication and make the pain go away. Mm-hmm. And I think in a similar level, when we feel emotional or spiritual pain, it gets in the way. We don't want that in our day. And the pain can be small, like the equivalent of a stubbed toe, of like, oh, I just feel a little hurt today. I don't know why, just like my feathers are ruffled or something. Or the pain can be really big, of I lost somebody who meant so much to me. And I think there's a real wisdom in that kind of pain, because it means that you have to stop. And the body that's sending us this message of, hey, like you are in pain, is asking for you to stop and to feel it and to mourn and to kind of take stock and be gentle.
Right.
And I don't think as a society at this moment in time, we have a lot of practices for that. You know, we kind of have, you know, if you're lucky, some grief leave, or, you know, we pay for a therapist visit or something like that, but we're like, okay, and now back to work, you know, back to the grind.
That's the first question people ask coming in for grief counseling. Okay, how long is this going to take?
Yeah, I would like to schedule feeling better by, you know, the end of my leave. And it's important that the body doesn't work that way. We don't work that way. You know, we want, we're in pain till we're not in pain anymore. We're mourning till we're not mourning anymore. And yeah, I think there's a wisdom in that even though it runs counter to the way society is structured right now, when there is room for that kind of pain, I think there's room for a really radical kind of healing that makes the whole world better.
I noticed that a lot with people, not only just avoidance, because you talk about, you know, the loss of a family member, like a death or divorce or, you know, something big, but then there's also the little things every day. And I think many of us deny ourselves the opportunity to acknowledge that this is okay to feel this way. For example, you know, my husband and I were doing some renovations, which of course is just like, you know, the worst thing that you can ever do with your partner is try to renovate something.
How'd that go?
So he was very frustrated. And so I noticed, because it was after I had talked to you about this, I noticed that I almost felt a physical pain as he wasn't snapping at me. He was snapping at, oh, you know, this flooring is all backwards and it's not the right type and I don't know how to do it. And so I noticed this, I was actually feeling a physical sort of a pain.
Yeah.
And I had to think about that for a while. And I you know, your first reaction is to go, okay, you know what? Get out of here. Leave. I don't want to do this. And but then I realized if I do that, I'm deliberately hurting him.
Yeah.
So then I'm trying to almost minimize the pain that I'm feeling. But what was going on there? I think my mind is saying, okay, something is wrong here. But it was the message I was receiving.
Yeah.
So the message I was receiving is not that he was frustrated at this silly flooring, but that he truly didn't want to help me.
Yeah.
That's what I was hearing.
Yeah.
And so what I ended up doing after, you know, realizing that this pain that I was feeling was valid was I got down on my knees right next to him and I said, I need you to stop.
Yeah.
I need you to take a breath because this is the way that you're acting is bothering me.
Yeah.
And then because I approached it in a calm way, it was, you know, it was diffused really quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas I could have handled that really poorly, or I could have ignored it and then resented him and then thrown around some dishes later and handled it all the wrong way.
Gotten mad at him for how he was chewing and
yeah.
that would have been the night.
But that would have been the consequence of me ignoring that pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think exactly what you said, that consequence is such a great word, that sometimes we think by avoiding that we're doing fine. And it's kind of taking that step back and going, what is the consequence of avoiding this? That by you giving room for pain, and that's just saying like, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling bothered, I feel like, can we just take a breath together and reconnect, because this is a project we're doing together. You just made room for it. You're like, I trust you enough that I'm going to let you know I'm in pain. And I also trust you enough that if I tell you that, we can figure it out together. And that it'll be like this kind of pain versus, and now we're like heading towards divorce pain.
Right.
that kind of, there's room in your relationship for those kind of hurts. And I think that's just such a beautiful example of that it kept everything as this like, okay, like we have this kind of flexibility and wisdom that we can talk about pain together. We can figure this out together. And I think rejection is one of the most, like, it's so painful. It's rejection, loss, and shame, I think, are such a trifecta of hurt in that kind of way.
That's so true. It's right up there with, I mean, we catastrophize that.
Yeah.
We just think, okay, if someone says something to me, maybe on text, and I go, excuse me, but you don't say anything back. It's funny, we're just so afraid of what if.
Yeah.
It paralyzes us.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also the cause of us pushing away that pain and not being there with it.
Yeah.
One more type of sort of avoidance pain I wanted to bring up was, and I'm the worst for this, procrastination.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that in terms of pain and avoidance? Like, why procrastination kind of falls into that category as well?
Yeah. Well, procrastination is avoiding future pain. So it's, it's that, I think that's the interesting thing about avoidance of pain is it's rarely are you avoiding the pain that's actually right in this moment. It's either you're avoiding the memory of pain that just, happened or happened a while ago, or you're avoiding the thought of future pain. And so it's kind of going like, I don't want that. I'm scared about that. And sometimes procrastination is not even that you think pain will actually happen, but just that it could, so you'd rather just stay neutral in this environment than go into that future where anything could happen, really.
Right. So how do people get into coping with this? Just turning, instead of turning away from it, running away, we're turning towards. How do you do that?
I think, and again, I can speak from my own experience, and I'm always fascinated when people kind of bring their own ways of coping to it as well. But I think one of the biggest things that people can do just to start is to acknowledge that they're in pain. And you did that, in that room. And so it's a bit of a funny practice because it involves just saying that, of saying like, oh, I notice I'm in pain right now. And trying to name and give as much kind of acknowledgement to that as possible.
Okay. And I'm just going to stop you for a moment. We'll be back after a short break and we'll talk a little bit more about making room for pain. Welcome back to Let's Grow. So Lara, you were just saying about ways to turn towards pain as opposed to turning away from it. And one of the things you just said was learning to acknowledge and say it out loud.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
So I recognize this probably won't be a popular thing. I mean, like, guess what? You can make room for pain in your life. But I do promise that it is one of those, it actually makes room for pain while decreasing suffering. And I think that by merely stating, like, I am in pain, whether it's, you have a conversation with your partner and you feel hurt by what they said, kind of similar to the story you were telling, to take a moment and whether it's internally or externally, saying like, I am in pain, I feel hurt. And just that acknowledgement in itself creates a little space for you to then have a reaction of being like, what do I need to do? Is this the kind of hurt that I just need to say like, yeah, that hurt, and then it doesn't have any kind of hooks, it's not going to linger? Or is it the kind of pain that has some hooks and you need to either share that with the person who, you kind of felt that hurt with, or share that with somebody who you can kind of talk about like, oh, this brings up this other feeling of hurt for me, this other feeling of pain, and it kind of echoes through this pattern I have, and isn't that interesting?
Right. So that can lead to a lot of insight, personal reflection,
Yeah.
especially the more often you acknowledge.
Yeah.
For example, I think you mentioned the headaches earlier. I get headaches all the time.
Yeah.
And you're right. Sometimes I'll just, take an aspirin or something like that and go on with my day. And other days I'll acknowledge that, okay, I have this headache and therefore I need to slow down.
Or exactly, like I have this headache. Interesting, I haven't drank any water today.
Yeah.
Interesting, I've been working under fluorescent lights all day. Interesting, I've been staring at my screen for 5 hours straight and now I have a headache. And so it's like the headache isn't evil, the headache is this message going like, hey bud, like what if you took better care of yourself? And I think messages of emotional pain are the same thing, of coming up going, hey bud, you kind of let that person walk over a boundary that you're pretty clear about. Why did you do that? What was keeping you from letting them know, actually that's a no for me, or that's a boundary for me? Or in sometimes like catastrophic pain of, hey, you lost somebody, this is grief. And all of those instances, it doesn't necessarily mean that pain is not going to go away immediately, but I think the more space we give it and the more time we give it, the less it's going to like keep hammering at the door, and the more it's going to go like, yeah, let's have a conversation about what you need right now.
Right.
Yeah.
It's maybe a misunderstanding as well to believe that giving time for pain is just losing time. That truly that work is being done.
Yeah.
Because whenever something big happens to us, especially something we've never experienced before, we need time to process. That means like our mind is reading all the paperwork and filing everything away and experiencing all the emotions so that it can file things away in a way that's not so heavy anymore.
Yeah.
So then people kind of maybe don't know that. And I didn't know that at one point as well. I just thought, no, just keep going.
Yeah.
And but it's interesting because you are actually doing work, aren't you?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the important thing, like people are asking about coping tools for pain, like your body knows, or like there's a wisdom when you acknowledge and say like, I'm in pain, what do I need? I think we often need coping tools for the avoidance, for the pain or the suffering that comes when we're like, okay, I'm not going to feel this. And so, I'm numb, or I'm panicking, or I'm, all these things come up because you're like, I can't handle that. And so there are coping tools for, for that kind of panic and anxiety and all of those things. But pain itself is often like, there's that inner wisdom of like, yeah, I need space and time. I need connection. I need to give voice to this. I need to clarify my boundaries. I need like whatever kind of comes up in that place of, here's my pain. What do I need?
Right.
Yeah.
So what are one of the skills that you talk about in terms of being able to cope?
So in terms of being able to cope, I think a lot of time when people say, I can't feel this pain, it hurts too much, usually that means that there's a whole like history of like tangled connection, so they're not just feeling the pain of their partner rejecting them, they're feeling the pain of their first heartbreak and their parents, and like all of these things get wrapped up in this message of pain. And so one of the first ways that I often work with people is starting to kind of untangle those threads a little bit and go like, okay, like in this moment right now, and like let's talk about this story and what comes up for you. And so we follow that thread for a bit, and then starting to recognize the other threads or the other reactions or the triggers in that kind of way. And then I combine that with a lot of grounding work. And when I say grounding work, it's that the kind of work that makes you feel connected and in your body and not disconnected and out of your body. So, we do a lot of kind of somatic, like whether it's tapping and touching the body or kind of noticing your environment. And I think all of that, it's the stories, but then it's also connecting you back to the present moment, kind of bringing a little more pain in, connecting you back to the present moment.
Right.
Yeah.
To be able to acknowledge that this is old stuff,
Yeah.
it's past pain or it's future pain,
Yeah.
but I'm here right now and I can control what's coming.
Yeah.
Or what I'm about to do with myself.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you talk about is radical acceptance. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so radical acceptance is, we've kind of been talking about it this whole time, but it's this idea of acknowledging or even just accepting that this moment is. Like there's nothing we can do to change the fact that right now we are right here, We can change it, like I could get up and walk out of this room, I could make other choices going forward, but we are here right now. And I think that's one of the hardest things for a lot of people is people confuse accepting with saying that it's okay. And a lot of times it isn't okay. There's things going on that are really painful or hard, or you could change how that happens in the future. But until you acknowledge and radically accept that this is where you are right now, this is how you are right now, there's no possibility to really make any kind of change.
It's really well said.
Yeah.
That you're not saying that it's okay, you're not A-okay, but
no,
it just is.
It
and
is.
so I'm not going to fight it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're in an abusive relationship, if you are feeling really rejected, if you're feeling like you have boundaries that are being walked over, the first step you need to do is accept that is happening. Like that there's an isness. And then we get to go forward from there and make change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thank you
coming
for
on and
having me.
talking about
Yeah.
this. Lara does write for a blog that is shared through the Kelly Magazine website and Kelly Mental Health Foundation. So you can look forward to more content from her. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.